Hello, I'm Tim Lindquist. I'm a professor in the software engineering program at ASU. This is a video that supports the native mobile app development course, SER423. In this video, we're going to talk about an introduction to the Xcode IDE, Integrated Development Environment. This material, if you look at the web page, the class web page, or at Blackboard, it's part of unit number 1. If you look at the second bullet down in iOS and Swift, it's a tour of Xcode's user interface. This actually comes from codewithchris.com. I'm going to be talking about Xcode version 8 instead of Xcode version 7. There are some differences, but on the other hand, from an overview perspective, I think you'll find that that's actually a pretty good reference. So let's take a look at Xcode, and actually the first thing is installing it. Talk a little bit about that. Xcode is a tool that has only been hosted on Mac OS X, Apple device. I actually had a student in class yesterday told me that they were able to load a legal version of OS X on a virtual machine. I don't have any experience with that, and I don't know how Xcode will work, but I do know that you, in order to download Xcode, you actually have to go to the App Store, the Apple App Store, and look for Xcode and actually follow it. So the current version as of this time is 8.2.1. Anything after version 8 is fine as far as I'm concerned for this class. Version 8 includes Swift 3.0 and actually all the conversion tools to convert from an earlier version of Swift to 3.0. Does a very good job of that. With Xcode comes the simulator for developing apps for iPhones, iPads, Apple TV, and also Apple Watch. So they all come bundled together. It's a huge download, but in fact they're all there, and I think actually it includes all of the documentation for the API and for the IDE itself, all as part of that download. So let's take a look at Xcode. When you start up Xcode, whoops, let's get rid of that one, and let's do a new. Actually, you can do this from the launch screen too, more commonly probably. So let's quit it and start it again. When you launch Xcode, there may be some dialogues you have to go through the first time to allow this machine to be a development machine and so forth, but you'll end up with this launch screen. So your choices are to get started with a playground, which is for interactively developing Swift code. Create a new Xcode project or check out an existing project, right? So there is a version management system that's available within Xcode. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but it is there and it's worthwhile. So let's go through creating a new project. For the purposes of this course, we're only going to be looking at iOS projects. And in almost every case, we're going to start out with a single view application. But the idea behind all of these is that there is a template for the code and all the other underlying resources that are necessary for a page-based application or a tab-based application or a master detail application, meaning that there is a list, and then selection of that list gives you the detail associated with it. So all of the setup and all of the templates to create those sorts of apps are already found within this initial project. You can always start from a single view application and build those, but in fact these are templates that provide shortcuts for you. So iMessage application, a sticker pack application, and the same thing with game. With a game, it uses a game kit along with it. So always iOS for this course anyway, although we may take a look at watchOS. And single view applications, so let's leave it at that, and we don't have to worry about anything other than the standard libraries. The next is the name of the app, so the product name is going to be Delete Me. because we're not going to do anything significant in here, and I just want to remember that when I see it in my file system, I have to get rid of it. Organization name for the purposes of SER423, it should be your student name, and then you'll find in the first assignment for the course, if you're going to be handing in code, you have to package it based upon ASU's domain name of the program that you're in and so forth. For me, it's edu.asu. SIDC is the organization, the department I'm in. SE is for software engineering, and then my last name. The language, it's either Objective-C or Swift, and we're going to be using Swift, and universal for devices is the default. That's fine. We're not going to use core data until we get to the section on core data, but include unit tests and include UI tests are good things to have. So this tells me where to create it, and there we go. So this is Xcode, and Xcode is fairly complex in its initial appearance. Included within Xcode is the simulator. It was downloaded, so all of the templates, didn't matter which one you picked, you can execute them right away. The triangle up in the top, the run triangle, it will actually build and run the app in its current state. And based upon the template, it is executable. We pick the target here, and in this particular case, instead of 7+, let's pick a 7 because its geography is a little less. And let's just, before we do anything else, let it start up the simulator. So I don't know if you can see it on the recording. The simulator is started up, and it will actually show an empty screen. So this is the simulator. So now notice at the top bar I've got the simulator app running, and I'm viewing the simulator app. There's several different things that we can do. We'll talk about lots of them, but probably one of the first things that you'll end up having to do is scale. All right, so if it's too big or too small, you can make it smaller or make it bigger. Typically, depending upon what screen or what kind of a display you've got, 100% doesn't always work. So there's and in this particular case, it's an empty app, so the view is completely empty. So for the purposes of this particular session, we're not going to do anything more about it, just to show you that the simulator is up. Our goal is to look at a tour of Xcode, and in order to do that, let's talk about the different areas that exist within Xcode. So I'm going to go back to the resource that is pointed out by the tour of Xcode's UI. And one of his graphics is the exact same thing that we were just looking at. I've got to decrease its size a little bit. So there is Xcode, and it identifies the different regions or different areas within Xcode. And we want to take a look at that. So across the top, the whole area across the top is the toolbar, typical with OS X, right? The three red, orange, and green to close, minimize, and maximize. And then the run, select the device. And over on the right-hand side are areas that will control the appearance and disappearance of the regions or the areas below. So the toolbar is primarily for initiating apps and then also controlling what you view down below. There's an editor area, a navigation area. The navigator area provides the ability to navigate your project and many other things related to your project. We'll take a look at that in a little more detail. And then on the right-hand side is the utility area. The utility area contains two different sections, primarily two different sections. We'll see those. We'll go back to the app itself, or back to the IDE. But in the top, the newer version has more than two here. But in the top are primarily properties, inspectors, and then in the bottom area, it's been minimized here, I guess, in this one. In the bottom area, we have several different controls that are available for us to do design and storyboarding of our app. The editor area, most commonly it's for editing code, but then also there's a storyboard, it's called Interface Builder, that allows us to create a storyboard for our app. What are the different views that we're going to have in the app? How do we navigate between those views? That information can all be sketched out before we even start working on code. And then this bottom area is the debug area. We can look at the log of the execution of our app when it's running on the simulator. So let's go back to Xcode, and let's first look at the navigator area. The navigator area has several different tabs. There's a symbol navigator in addition to, well, let's go back to Xcode. So the navigator area has different tabs, right? So these tabs control what gets displayed in the area. The leftmost is the most common, and it's the project. So the project that we are defining, these are all of the aspects or parts of that project that we may need to manipulate and or create. The next one provides us with a hierarchical or flat view of the components within it. And then next is for finding. So this is the find navigator, and it provides us with the ability to search for strings within the project or within code in the project. The next one will tell us errors, build time or runtime errors. So when we have error in our source code, they'll show up also in the editor area as well as being summarized over here, and we can link back and forth between them. And this actually provides, I forgot what this one's called, test navigator, right, for testing the different tests. And then for debugging, this actually shows when we're in the middle of a debugging session with the simulator running. It actually shows the trace and values that we're interested in. The symbol for a breakpoint is that closed right arrow, and this allows us to manage breakpoints that we want to set within the program to have our program stop at different points. And then there's also a report navigator. As I said, the most common one, and the one that, well, at least the one we'll use the most in this class, is the project navigator. And notice that when we select an element in the project navigator, it changes what is in the editor area. Okay, so before we go any further playing around with that, to finish up with the toolbar, in the upper right-hand side of the toolbar are two different controls. And one of the more confusing things probably about this ID, and not just this ID, but other IDs, is that sometimes they're like tabs and sometimes they're like binary switches. Well, in the case of all 6 of these, they are binary switches, off and on, right? So blue indicates that they're on, being displayed, and black indicates that they're not. So the area called the debug area is the bottom of the editor, and with it being black up here, it's not being displayed. If I click it, then in fact it's on and it is being displayed. And notice that when I click it, the debug area, which shows me a trace of what's going on, the log of what's going on the simulator or on the device as my app is running, is being shown at the bottom, right? So I can display it or not. The same thing for the navigator. So the blue bar inside this rectangle indicates whether or not the navigator panel is being displayed. So with it being blue, it is being displayed. If I click it, it's no longer being displayed. So if I make all 3 of those black, then my editor area takes up the entire screen. And if I need to, I can look at just one or more parts of it based upon which of these I make blue. Okay, so that's kind of an explanation of those 3. The next 3 actually control what is being displayed in the editor area, and we have the ability. Let's turn off the utilities and inspector, and look at what the difference is. So these are not binary switches. They actually, right, so multiple clicks on this, just leave it on and turn it on. So this, I'm either selecting a single single file to be displayed in the editor area, or in this case it's called the assistant editor, which displays two. And that's actually most useful when we're storyboarding. So this is the storyboard, which is the way that we end up designing our app. And let's see if I can get it minimized. And within it, we actually have two different areas. So you can see controls at the bottom. We'll minimize it. So since we picked a single view app, this is the design for that single view app, the view for that single view app. And the arrow here indicates that this is the launch screen. So when we start this app, in fact, it'll show this particular view. So down here I have the ability to have a hierarchical view of the views that are in it. So that expands the view area. We don't have anything else actually within our view controller aside from a single view, but selecting the components. So when we add buttons and other things, they will be layered below the view or above the view, whichever way you want to view it. They will be displayed below the view, but they actually will be on top of the view from a perspective of what the user will see. So I'm trying to explain what the concentric circles are here for. So MVC, Model View Control, this is the view, and the storyboard provides us with the ability to create different views and then control the navigation between those views in our app. So if we have an app that has multiple screens that we want to be able to move from one to the other, as the user, for example, selects a name or a picture, the name or title of a picture or whatever, to move to another screen, then in fact we can design that and storyboard it in this main.storyboard. And to make the connection with code, which is the controller part of it, right? So this is the view. The view is what the user sees, and then the code is what controls that view. When we select the concentric circles, it will pick the code that is the controller for that particular thing being shown in the view. And that allows us to make connections and take a look at the source code at the same time that we're doing a view. All right, so we can actually do design of our program in such a way that we can take advantage of looking at the storyboard at the same time that we're playing with the code that goes along with it. So as I said, these are not binary, right? There is the ability to have them horizontally split or have it vertically split, and that's what you see there. But in fact, it's either the concentric circles or it is a single file. In this case, let's do this, go back to the navigator. So now let's go back and look a little more at the navigator. Within the navigator, single click is the right, well, if you double click anything in the navigator, you get a separate window for it. So if you have multiple displays, then you may want to double click and pull the code for one onto a different display. But more commonly, just to bring something up in the editor area, you single click on it. So here are two different Swift classes that are included in this default app, and you can see their code when I click them, and nothing happens when you do a folder. On the other hand, when you click the project icon itself, you end up getting all of the different properties, editable properties of a project. So we'll see there'll be times this semester when we'll be adding different things to and manipulating things within the project properties. Okay, so that's intended to be a view. Now there are obviously drop-down menus that have a lot more functionality. Lots of different stuff that we'll be doing this semester. So for example, if I want to add a file to my project, I can actually from the Finder drag it into and place it within my project, and it will ask me whether or not I want to create separate groups or create a folder reference, and then which parts of the project I want to put it into. So there you can see it gets added to the project. Within a given project, I can actually create groups, so I can group my source code if I want to, and so forth. But we'll be looking at some of those as we go through through the different aspects of app development. Finding, I probably ought to mention that in the navigator, right? So finding, if we're looking for text, there's a good way to look for it, and we can select whether we're going to find it in the project, and whether or not we want to match case or ignore case, right? Does uppercase, lowercase matter, and so forth, right? So here are the different find options. I can find text, I can find references, I can find definitions, and I can even search using regular expressions if you're familiar with that, and also call hierarchy, and then I can also specify replacement. So it's a pretty explicit, or a pretty well-developed finding tool or searching tool that can be used in Xcode as well. All right, so let's leave it at that. In the next video, what we're going to do is actually develop an app, and we'll go through the source code and the different resources that are available for us within Xcode in order to develop a simple single view app.